All right, so here we are in November. I hope you all had a wonderful and safe Halloween this year. You guys had fun. It was mostly a low key Halloween for me. I did get to engage in something that is not a usual occurrence on Halloween, and that is watch a movie. Um, well, I'll rephrase that. Watching a movie sometimes is a usual occurrence on Halloween, but what isn't is going to the theaters. So I came up, went out, and saw a movie that I was looking forward to seeing, and have some thoughts. And I know we're in November now, so there's a whole slew of other movies to get into. But I had to talk about this movie. Today's movie, at the close of the spooky season reviews, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. Let's talk about it. Guillermo del Toro is probably one of my favorite filmmakers working today. I've always felt a kinship to him and his work. And in fact, one of the most favorite things that I own is the Pacific Rim DVD 2-disc set that has the audio commentary of the movie on it. And what's fascinating about it is Del Toro's the way he talks about monsters. It's like he's giving a lecture. It's like you're taking a class from him, and he's talking about the nerdiness of what it took to design the monsters and the musculature, and also talking about it in the context of the story, and how he seems like he'd be a really cool person to hang out with and talk monsters with, and you can feel his presence in that movie and in a lot of his movies. And Frankenstein is not an exception. If you know anything about Del Toro's connection with the material, that this is probably the film that he'd been wanting to make for a long time, probably since he became a filmmaker. I'm not sure if it runs that deep. I know it runs pretty deep. And then one of his favorite books ever is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. When you marry the source material with a director that feels right for that material, I think the result, more often than not, even if you don't like it, is something that's worth your attention. And I think Frankenstein is worth your attention for sure. Frankenstein, the story, is one of those old stories that's kind of committed to myth. Almost, it's like this legend, and there's been so many different iterations of it. How can you tell that story and make it fresh, make it new? I think the answer to that question is sincerity. Whatever version you come across, I think what they all have in common is, for the most part, a degree of earnestness and sincerity that sets that version apart from something else. This is probably one of the greatest examples of that. You have someone who's loved the source material since they were very young. And then you have someone who's made the ultimate love letter to the source material, to the themes it presents. And I walked out of the movie feeling like if Del Toro never made another movie, I would be happy with that. This could be his last movie, and he could just go off and do something else. He's got so many ideas. He can just go on producing other movies. He could be a creative director somewhere. He could go to school and be a professor, and just do that, and I'd be happy. That's how impactful and deep this movie and personal this movie was. I understand it was a personal story personal for him, but it was very personal for me. It was almost at times hard to watch because it felt like it was almost autobiographical, like it was telling a story that I understood very well, even if I didn't know anything about Frankenstein or the story of Frankenstein or anything like that. It hit me pretty deeply. This movie really deals with, there's a central relationship between Victor Frankenstein and the creature. That's the sort of backbone, that's the foundation of this whole story. There are other things going on as well. Victor Frankenstein has a brother who is getting married, and there's a relationship with that person there, with Elizabeth, and all of that. There's a bunch of other stuff going on, but really the core really is about Victor Frankenstein and the creature. So Dr. Frankenstein obviously is an accomplished doctor, and who when we meet him, he's giving a presentation to his peers at the medical school in Edinburgh somewhere, and believes he's found the key to immortality, or extending life, bringing people back from the dead or whatever it is. Of course, he's ridiculed for this. People are not really with it, but that's okay. We all know what happens. We know eventually he gets to the funding to fulfill his, run all of his tests and, reanimate something that was once dead, resulting in the creature along the way. And what transpires is essentially a dance between Frankenstein and his creation. The movie is told from each from their perspectives. And I think through that, it's actually genius, because through that you get to understand each side intimately and then decide where you fall on the spectrum as an audience member. So let's get the obvious out of the way. The acting is across the board top notch. Oscar Isaac is just, he's full of intensity. Also, the humor. He's very funny. And I was struck by how much I thought, this came to me later after I watched the movie, I thought about another character he played in Ex Machina, Nathan, who is another rock star, super intelligent, who has created artificial intelligence. He's created a new life out of nothing. Like he's, programming and different things. And so I like to think there's some cross-pollination between the two characters, who both are a little bit arrogant, a little bit, they're so smart. They're too smart for their own good. And they think they know what's best. And in both cases, in some ways, that results in their downfall. So it's an interesting connection in that way, that Nathan and at least Oscar Isaac's, Frankenstein in general, the character, but Oscar Isaac's version of Victor Frankenstein as sort of a precursor to Nathan, working in transitional periods in human history, where you have a guy who's posited this big idea that he can conquer death. And then another guy in the way, hundreds of years in the future, Nathan, who has created an artificial intelligence system in the form of a sentient being that, like the creature in this movie, really is asserting, Ava is asserting her personhood. She's not just, an inanimate object. She's not something to be just strictly used as a tool for humans' amusement. And I think there's an interesting conversation between the two movies that can be had in that instance. There is a thread or a theme that has to do with parents and children. And both movies do this, but I think deal with this. But to a larger extent, I think Frankenstein is really all about that. And that was so personal to me. I'm sure many people identified with the creature. And in some cases, you identify with Victor as a child who had this tough dad who named him. There's a bit of importance placed on names, and how as a son who's been given a name that they have to live up to, you have a dad who has like these, this like a major reputation, who has this personality that looms big, and you're in the shadow of that all the time. As a kid, you don't understand that your parent is just a human. But I think over time, as your parent continues to try to shape and control you, and you assert your own individuality, that can lead to conflict. And that was so personal to me. That was my experience growing up. I had a dad who was very much like Victor's dad in some ways. And, I'm a junior, so I got the same name. So there's tons of conversations about trying to live up to that, the looming presence of this person, and trying to be my own person in that. And there's having to struggle with like not trying to be a copy of the generation that came before me. How do I be my own person? And the creature similarly is like, yo, man, I'm not a it. Like I'm a person. I think so often in certain instances for certain families, children are not treated like people, at least at a certain generation. My generation, I had parents who grew up in an earlier era where your kids you didn't really care about what your kids felt, what they thought. Really, it's just like, and I understand that was what my parents had to lived with, and so they it was a little bit more progressive. But for us, my siblings and I, but still, you know, when you were a kid, you didn't really, it didn't often, it didn't matter what you wanted, what you thought, how you felt. You're supposed to take whatever the stuff is, whatever the punishment is, whatever it is, and just deal with it. So you're often more like property as opposed to a person. And the creature felt very much like that in this movie. There was the conflict of like him growing and learning and becoming his own person, and having that come into with friction with Victor. Was something that was so emotionally, it was actually kind of hard to mess with in this movie. There's such feeling, and then which brings me to my thoughts on Jacob Elordi's performance as the creature. There was such empathy that he got out of me but I think this is something that I've seen in, particularly I think of James Welles' 1931 Frankenstein, and I think Boris Karloff there was a sadness about how he played the role too, and there's an innocence there. And so you felt for the monster, and I think that if I look at the two films in conversation with each other, it's a nice sort of echo to what Del Toro has done with this movie and what Jacob Elordi has brought to the performance, because I felt tremendously sad for him. And there was one thing about the performance when he spoke, but also how he moved. There was a physicality to how Jacob Elordi played the character that feels very much progressive, and I love that. I love that when he first begins to move, he's learning about his body and trying to figure out how things work and what he's touching things and everything. But as the film progresses, the moves he starts to get his legs under him, and he starts to become more confident in his moves, like walking, running, touching, doing different things. It's actually really cool. It's really cool to see. There's a genuine progression of an entity that is learning. A lot like, we don't see this from Ava directly, like clearly, but it is there. Ava in Ex Machina, how she's a system, and as she interacts with humans, she's learning how to interact with them, which means she's learning about how to lie, how to be manipulative, she's learning all the traits that humans show her, and she's using that to learning about how to survive. And I think the creature is the same way. He starts out very innocent and just very naive, and through his meeting the old man in this movie, which is probably, I think, one of my favorite sections of the film, where he meets the old man and he gets to talk to him and learning about human connection in a way that is opposite from what he was getting from his creator, Victor, which is so much like another thing that struck me, like in real life, when you have hard times in your family, as you go through life, you meet other people who, for whatever time period that is, can fulfill those roles too. They become your other father figures, your other mother figures, or whatever it is outside of what you have, and they can give you things as you grow into yourself and become an adult that can help. Your parents don't have the tools at that time for certain things, so they only can do what they can do with what they have. And as you go through life, you meet other people who have other skills that can kind of oddly give you what you wanted from your parents or needed from your parents, and you'll get through it. It's just like one of those things that it just takes that learning experience. And I think the creature has a similar experience in coming across the old man, who was like they become really good friends, but that also, he's also like this father figure person who's lived a lot of life and has had all these experiences that the creature hasn't had, who can impart some wisdom. And it's beautiful to witness how he's growing and learning. I got to talk about Mia Goth, of course. She's, very good in this movie. I loved how different her performance was from anything else I'd seen. I'm used to her screaming and going kind of crazy, whatever, in the X movies, but also in a movie called The Infinity Pool, I think I also talked about on this channel. There is an expectation. When Mia Goth is cast, you know what you're getting. She's going to have a section where she's screaming and like being hysterical or whatever it is. That's kind of why you go to see Mia Goth. This movie is not like that. It's very much understated, and it was almost like there was a calmness to it, which I really liked. That I dug her performance. I dug that there was a really there was much more restraint, and it really worked for me as an audience member, given what I know about the Mia Goth from the movies that I've seen of her. I liked that this was it was really felt like a breath of fresh air, really, watching her in this movie. She was very good. Christoph Waltz is very good. It's a shame he's not around as long, but he brings gravitas. I have to talk about the production design on display. It's just immaculate. It's up there with some of the best production design that Guillermo del Toro has had in any of his movies. I would put this against any of his other films that all have immaculate production design, particularly if they're period pieces too. I think of something like Pan's Labyrinth. I thought about like Hellboy, or any of those things where that show pieces of stuff from other earlier time periods. Just fully immersive. I understand that they built like real sets. There's a real boat they built. It's just it makes a big difference because you can see it. It's the practical effects on display, just fantastic. And also just the prosthetics. That's the other thing I loved about this movie. This movie probably has I mean, I'm sure other movies do have a cool way of showing it too, but the way Victor is putting together the pieces of the body before the creature awakens, this movie does probably the best job, I think, that I've seen, that shows what it takes to put body parts together, take parts from other bodies and put it together. It's really visceral, and at the same time, it's not. The movie is not overindulgent with it. It's just, it feels almost like clinical, like you're looking at a medical text, and you're looking at, like, you're a medical student looking at a cadaver and having people dissect it it feels very clinical in that way, and it's very well done, just fantastic. The prosthetics on display, and then Jacob Elordi's makeup, the design of the creature in this movie is great. I like how different it feels from James Whale's Frankenstein. I like that it feels like a wholly different thing, and still fits in keeping with what's happening in the story that we're watching. It's really cool. From a writing standpoint, I think that structurally, I love that the film was told from two perspectives. And I think I understand the book does this as well, slightly differently, but I think that's the way to, again, this is going back to the theme about fathers and sons, or children and parents. I feel like so much of it is that your parents have a version of stuff, and as a child you have a version of events, and this movie has like a mediator in a way. There's someone in the middle who has no direct like stake really in either one of their plights or whatever it is, but to hear a neutral, have a neutral party hear the story of events from two separate parties. It's like, going to therapy, like you go into like family therapy, and you have your therapist, you have you and your parent, and you guys get to sort of have it out. You talk about your whole situation, and you talk about like the challenges you have, whatever it is, from both of your perspectives, and having that third person just kind of listen. And then through that, real understanding happens, and learning about, forgiveness, which in real life is not always possible. Sometimes you can't always do that. Things are probably so rough, so bad that, and that's okay too, but you're getting to a place where you have a dialogue. And I think it felt very cathartic, I think, for me watching this movie and understanding the clear dynamics at play between parents and children, and just how gutted and emotional I was just by just watching everything play out. It was quite personal. This week, coming up pretty soon, Frankenstein will be on Netflix. So if you missed it in the theater, don't worry. It will be available to stream, which is cool. But I also think it's honestly, it's a shame that it doesn't get to stay in theaters much longer. It's certainly worthy of, I got to see it on the big screen. It's that kind of movie. It's a movie that deserves to be seen on the big screen. And it's just a shame it won't be in theaters as long. But if you didn't catch it in theaters and you do miss it, again, they were showing it in very select theaters. So that's kind of, unfortunate, but whatever. Netflix will have it. Highly recommend you check it out because it's very good. You may not even, you don't have to think it's Del Toro's best work. But personally, I do think it's pretty close. If it's not, like I said, he could stop making movies right now and I would be fine. I just, as a fan of his, just amazing work. So highly recommend Frankenstein. If you've seen it, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I am right now going through a rabbit hole of Frankenstein videos and conversations with Del Toro as he's talking about the process, whatever. I'm loving all of that. So also I've seen some really good ones, so I encourage you to seek that out too if you're curious about that. Anyway, that's going to do it for the review of Frankenstein. If you're still here, thank you for taking the time to watch and hang out with me for a second. I'm out of here. It's time for dinner. Got to go eat. But in the meantime, take it easy, and I will see you in the next video.